Alright, so let's say that you want to create LOD models for your unit. And if you don't know, an LOD model is basically a level of detail model. And this basically makes it to where when the camera gets farther and farther away from the unit, it basically becomes less detailed. And this is a precaution. This is something that is used in the game in order to prevent lag, or to run on lower end systems, or even to turn down graphical settings. That's what that's used for. And as you can tell here, if I get rid of some of these LODs here, basically there are more or less detailed versions of the vehicle. So for example, this is the highest poly version of the tank head, but then if I remove that and then I replace it with this one, you can tell that this one is much less detailed and much less intricate. And you don't necessarily have to remodel these every single time. You can just create a new model and you can apply a modifier to it to decrease the topology. And right now I'm going to show you basically how you would do this. So let's pretend that none of these exist up here. Matter of fact, you know what? For the sake of this tutorial, I am just going to delete these. So imagine you're trying to create an LOD for your vehicle. This is something that you would want to do for multiple parts of the vehicle. But this is pretty much what you're going to do. You're going to take the object that you have, you're going to right click, and then you're going to click clone. You're going to want to make sure to copy and not use this as an instance. But we already have LOD3 as the name here, so we're going to have LOD2. It's important that after the name of your object, you have to have LOD and then like 0 through 3. Or 4 or 5, however many LODs you have. But normally the limit is around 2 to 3. But you basically have LOD2, and we're going to clone again. We're going to say LOD1, and we're going to clone one more time and say LOD0. 0 being the least detailed LOD model. And what we're going to do after that is we're going to hide all of the ones that we don't want to see. So we're going to work on the second one. And the way we can decrease the level of detail on this model is we're going to click on it, and then we're going to head over to the modifier list, and we're going to find multi-res. And you're going to click multi-res, and this allows you to reduce the topology. If we press F3 here, you can see the tank and all the different shapes that are involved in making it. So what we're going to do is click generate, and then we can set this to 75, for example. And that is going to reduce the poly count on the tank. So we'll just leave it at that. And something to keep in mind is after you do this, you're going to want to make sure that the multi-res modifier is underneath the skin modifier. Otherwise, it's not going to be animated. So if I go over to the Alamo Utilities section, and then let's just play the attack animation, you can tell that it's not moving. So what you want to do to fix that is take multi-res and put it underneath the skin modifier. And once you do that, it'll start moving again. But basically the process is that we're going to do that for the other LODs. So for this one, we'll click on that, add multi-res, and then we'll click generate and set this to 50. So you can tell that it's getting less and less detailed. Next, we're going to drag this underneath, but go to LOD 0, click on it, multi-res, generate, and we can set it to something like 25. So now it's getting really ugly, really undetailed. You can adjust this number to whatever you want. You can even see the difference in the poly count as you're making it more or less detailed. You can get rid of the modifier, do whatever you want, that sort of thing. But yeah, that's basically how this works and how you're able to create a less and less detailed model from nothing. And it's okay if it looks a little jagged, if it looks a little ugly, because this is the model that you would hypothetically see if you were like all the way out here. You can't tell that this is less detailed than what it already is. I mean, it even shows you like what the vertice count is and how much we're decreasing it. But yeah, just make sure multi-res is underneath skin so that way it can be animated. And there you go. So another tool that you can use when creating these LODs is take, for example, the wheels down here. If I go ahead and hide these and just display wheel, what you'll actually notice is that I used a special type of modifier for the wheels down here. Actually, I got rid of it. The modifier is optimize. So let's say that I wanted to reduce the poly count a little bit on these wheels, but the multi-res modifier wasn't working very well for me. I'm going to clone this, and we can just call it LOD2. It doesn't matter. Normally, you'd have 2, 1, 0, whatever. Maybe you could make the 2 exactly the same as the 3, but 1 and 0 are different. But basically, what we're going to do here is we're going to use an optimize modifier. And what you can do is you can play with like the bias and the face threshold. And I forgot exactly what the numbers were before, unfortunately, because I'm being dumb. But this is the modifier that I used previously in order to get rid of the rims on these wheels. Matter of fact, I can just pull that up and show you real quick. But just taking a look at these wheels right here, this is what they look like with the modifier applied. And it looks like we did a face threshold of 14.8, edge of 47.2, and that would yield a similar result. So if we came back here and we use those same numbers, so 14.8, set this back to 1, set this back to 0, 47.2 I think it was. Oh, right, I'm being dumb. I still have this visible, don't I? There we go. So, making sure that you only have the one that you're changing visible, but as you can tell, you're able to use this as a different type of modifier in order to adjust the wheels and make this look the way it needs to be. Just to show you the different options out there. So you have multi-res and you have optimize. And you do want to make sure, yeah, I don't think you have to put optimize underneath skin, but it probably doesn't hurt in order to do so. But yeah, that's basically the gist of it. But there's one final step. Okay, every time you have an LOD, it needs to be called LOD1, LOD2, LOD0, etc., etc. But in order for these to actually show up and work inside of the game, once you have everything configured like this, and you're about to port this object into the game, what you do is you go over to your Alamo utilities, and then down here you're going to find this quick section, and what you're going to do is press LOD, and you're going to go to 1, LOD, 2, LOD, 3, LOD, and this is basically configuring the program to recognize the different LOD models, so that when you run that inside of the game, it's going to recognize those LODs. And then one more thing that I'd like to show you is LOD bias. So whenever the game recognizes LOD models, what it's doing is it's checking a value near the beginning of the code. And it's called LOD bias. And it'll look something like this. And this basically is the number that tells you how far away the camera has to be before it starts switching to a different model. For testing purposes, if you are going into the game, you would want to set this to around 1 or around 0.5. And this would allow you to see the model change while still being relatively close to it, to see if anything happens, to make sure that the models are switching correctly and that you're actually seeing a difference in them appearing and disappearing. But for all intents and purposes, you want something higher than that. So like if you're using a Marine or like a soldier or whatever, you might want it set to like a 3 or a 4, depending on how ugly the LODs look. Like if an LOD is really janky or bad looking, you want to raise the numbers up so you can be farther away from it. But generally speaking, that is how LOD works inside of the game. That is how you can create an LOD model. And also, if you're wondering, alt models, just as an added bonus, alts are whenever you have something that's taking damage over time, like a building. You can actually have LODs and alts at the same time, which is actually described, I believe, in here and here. And you can basically have an alt stacked with an LOD, but what the alts do is, imagine you have the building, and then the building becomes crumpled, and then it becomes more crumpled. That's because it's taking damage over time, and it's swapping to a different version of that model when it happens. So you basically go through the exact same process, where you take a model, and you clone it, and you give it a new name, new texture, warp it, do whatever else, and you define that as an alt, the same way as an LOD. But yeah, that's basically how it works. That is how you create LODs for Universe at War. That's how you get them to show up in the game. Yeah, that's just how you configure them and get them to work.